Hello folks, today we're going to examine the subject of Southern Cephalotus death syndrome. This is when a plant is growing perfectly well. There's no sign in the world that anything is going wrong, and suddenly it collapses. What you're looking at in front of you is the Cephalotus bubble giant that I received back in 1992, I think, or 95. And as you can see, it is growing in a terracotta pot in a tray. And when this I usually fill the tray with about an inch or two of water, and I will replenish the water once it is all evaporated and dried up. And at the bottom of the terracotta pot is about 3 inches of perlite. So everything looks fine, and this is one of the reasons why you need to inspect your Cephalotus daily to ensure that there's nothing going on with your plant. So upon closer inspection, you will notice there is a dried pitcher right here, and upon inspection it's like, I wonder what happened. Was this pitcher accidentally dislodged during the weekly periodic maintenance? Or is there something else going wrong? So if the pitcher suddenly collapses like this and everything still looks well. Now, this plant has been growing for over 30 plus years in this plant, and it started with one. And as it's growing, it multiplied and sent off shoots, side shoots from its main crown. The bubble giant, one of the characteristics is it doesn't send long underground stolons as what you might find in a typical Cephalotus. However, it does shoot off new growing points around the crown. So as this plant kept growing, it's continued growing and sending off shoots and produce this massive plant that you see here. So there are multiple growing points in this pot, and as with Sarracenias, as the rhizome grows, it multiplies, the bottom rots away, and then you have multiple plants. The same is with Cephalotus. So if you're looking at this plant here, and if you're checking your Cephalotus often, you can feel the texture of the leaves. And when you notice that some of the textures of the leaves doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel like it has plump, they're firm, they're resilient when you're squeezing it, and they're shiny. They have a shine to it. For this picture, for these leaves. But when you come across to this area here, first you'll notice this leaf is obviously limp and dehydrated. And then next to it, this one feels nice and firm. And then you'll notice here's another leaf that isn't doing so well, and then you'll find another. Now if we trace this leaf back to its source, you'll notice that it's coming to this point right here, this plant right here, this growing point. And as a matter of fact, this leaf also traces back to another growing point right here. Now what is causing it is just probably this plant or this growing point has rotted away, and you know, things happen. Sometimes no matter how well you treat a plant and what environment they're growing in, things happen, and this is the result. So what do you do when you notice a plant like this? Well, Cephalotus, I would consider them the camels of the plant world, of the carnivorous plant world, because they will grow well and everything looks perfect. If you're also filling the pitchers with water and keeping the soil nice and moist, it will grow really well. And even if something happens to the roots, it, you know, for a time, it will still get its nutrients from the pitchers, you know, getting its water, getting hydration. But it will get to a point where that doesn't work anymore and the plant would just collapse, just like a camel. You know, if you Google camels in a caravan would just walk forever, even when they're sick. And suddenly it will just drop dead in the middle of the desert. So, what are we going to do? This crown is growing from a point, and it looks like this is also growing from this point here and this point here. And see, you can see there are more limp pitchers. So it looks like it is all coming to this whole area. Now, if caught early, there is one way to save this plant. Now, bear in mind, the root of this section is gone. It is dead. There's no way to dig down, transplant this whole thing, and try to save it. The only way to save it is to treat it as a cutting. And the way I would go about doing that, so first I'm going to trace this back to where it began. Okay. So it looks like it is coming down to this point right here. You can see. Now, when I'm touching this plant, this growing point right, you know, this area, all the leaves that are connected to this dry pitcher, it feels a little bit soft, unlike the other leaves, which is nice, hard, and firm. So you know this is the problem area, and there are still other pitchers. And if you notice, it's not really, it doesn't have that luster to it. And that's how you tell you have a sudden death syndrome on your hands. So if I trace it back, I can find the source, and I can see that it is there, okay. And because it is attached to this plant as well, let me trace that to the source and see where it leads. And what I will also try to do is remove as much of the stem as possible, leaving the other. So I'm just, by feel, I'm just trying to feel where this thing goes, and it's quite long. Okay, there we go. So as you can see, the rest of the plant is intact. And since this is such a big plant, it really doesn't seem to affect the overall aesthetics, because this thing is just big. And if you remove one growing section, it's like removing a branch. Eventually that area will come back. So now what you have here is a plant that I just removed, where, and if you can see, it is quite old by the length of the stem. Yeah, you can see that. And you can see this is the picture that I originally spotted that was dying. Next to us this plant, and the way it's connected, you have this main stem right here that's been growing quite a while, and then you have a branch of the main stem right here, and then you have the rest of the plant rooting down here. So what I'm going to, but before I do anything else to it, what I need to do is get it rehydrated. Now, and also for all the pictures that are still here, I'm going to just remove the lid. Like so. This one is too far gone, so there's really nothing I can do with this. But you know what? Let's see what happens. I'll just remove the lid as well. And now what I'm going to do is cut the bottom at a steep angle. There we go. That way more of the base is exposed. The next thing I'm going to do is I have a container right here with just plain water, and I'm going to take the entire cutting, place it into the water, and for all the pictures that I remove the lid, I make sure that water is inside. So you have that one right there, you have this one right here, and where was that really dehydrated one? Ah, that really dehydrated one down here. So I make sure that there's water in there. Now I'm going to just put this in here and just let it sit for a few hours. Okay, and we're back. So if you look at the cutting, it is now nice and firm. And also, if you look at the pictures are also very nice and firm. The one that was all desiccated and wilted before the dunk, look, is totally reconstituted, nice and firm and stiff. Unfortunately, if you look at it closely, you will notice that it looks like it has similar to freezer burn because it's off color. So even though it reconstituted, I may not use it and I may still remove it. The same with this one, same thing, nice and firm, but as you can see, this one is even more evident of the damage from the desiccation, and then everything else looks pretty good. Now, remember the plant earlier, this was just one piece of a large plant. If you have a plant with multiple crowns and you notice that the entire plant just felt soft, you have the only way to save the plant is just to cut all of the growing points off and treat everything like cuttings, because the roots are gone and there's really no saving it. So now that we have this, early on I mentioned you may want to keep the rootstock here, but this is fairly old, so normally with all cuttings that I use, I like to start fresh. And yes, there is a potential opportunity that side shoots will grow from this, but I'm not really interested in that. all I'm interested is in this growing point and in this growing point right here. So I'm looking at this. So what I'm going to do is so first I will just do a rough cut here and then decide later what to do with it. Okay, so here's one plant that I will propagate later, and now here's the other plant. Now what I may want to do is just keep as much as the rootstock intact, and what I'll do here is just cut it right here. And then I'll cut the other piece right after. Okay, so this is a nice piece. You have two very good large surface areas. Here's one side, and here's the second side. Now, to reduce transpiration, because this is just a cutting now, I am going to treat it as a cutting. I'm going to... I'm very doubtful that this picture is going to live for long, because I usually like to keep the pictures on these. Yeah, you know, it's not. If you can notice, if I'm moving it, this point is damaged, so it's gonna go. So what I'm going to do is, with this cutting, to reduce transpiration, I'm going to remove that point. I'm going to remove this point here, and I will also remove this leaf over here. Okay, and I will also remove this leaf over here. And this picture here, even though it has reconstituted and nice and firm, it is still damaged. You can see there. So I'm going to remove it as well. So what I'm left with is a developing picture, two developing pictures, 1, 2. And what I would do now is dip this cut end into some rooting hormone. And let me set this one aside and take a look at this other piece. I'm going to cut this at an angle, like so. Okay. And then I'll give it the rooting hormone treatment as well. I just have a couple of the nylon cords. Now this fuzzy thing here, I do notice once in a while when I use these nylon cords, for some reason maybe the soil doesn't have good contact, or maybe manufacturing, the pot has a tendency to dry out. So also for those who are not able to get their hands on this type of nylon cord, you see this piece right here? This is a strip of capillary mats. So if you don't have access to these nylon cords, or you prefer to use something more used in agriculture, then go ahead and get a capillary mat, cut it into little strips, and they function just as well to wick water into the media. And you can see as the water makes its way down, the white cord is now brown, and you know it's working. And I just put a B for Bubble Giant and today's date. And that's one. So now I'll just put the dome onto this. So this will keep the humidity high, and also the dome I've already perforated the top to give it some ventilation. And then for the same, I'll do to this one at the dome. There you have it. Okay, so 3 months later, and here we are. As you can see, they're doing fantastic. And now they're ready to be potted up and move on to new and better projects. So this is when we started. August 2nd, 2025. Cuttings from a plant that experienced sudden Cephalotus death syndrome. This is one. So let's take off the hood. There we go. And here's the second one. So if you're wondering why doesn't this guy post more videos? Well, unfortunately, Cephalotus are slow growers. So okay, and here are the plants, nicely potted up and ready to let it grow out. And just so you know, these are 4-inch pots. They're a little bit deeper, and there is about 1 inch of perlite at the bottom. And the way these are watered, I will only fill this tray to about 1/2 inch, let it dry out, and then refill 1/2 inch. And that's how I would water these plants. They're never ever constantly sitting in water. And the letting the water dry out gives time for air to get into the bottom of the pots, so therefore give it some aeration, because in the future, if these plants were kept in these pots, that's where most of the root mass will be. Alright, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments. Have a good day.